They say a house isn't a home without people living in it. So what's a temple without worshippers or a city without its residents? To put that another way, what happens to places that used to be important to people once those people have stopped going there? Well, let's check out a whole video full of them and find out. We begin with the Bodheshwar Temple Complex in Morena, India, which looks remarkably pristine for a collection of ancient temples. There's good reason for that. The temple complex has been painstakingly restored to its original appearance. Indian historians believe that the complex was created by the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty between the 8th century and the 10th century, but they don't know how they did it. The moment the empire fell, its history was lost, and its creations were swallowed by the surrounding jungle. It wasn't until the 19th century that the ruined temples were rediscovered by Western archaeologists. Based on the damage at the site back then, experts concluded that there had been a serious earthquake in the 13th century. It wasn't until the 20th century that restoration work was carried out, after which the Bodheshwar Temple Complex became a protected site. Only around 80 of the temples here have been restored. There are still at least 120 standing, or semi-standing, in a ruined state. Although the site is open for the public to explore, very few people ever do. India is full of interesting abandoned temples. Here's the Chausath Yogini Temple in Mitauli. The design of this temple served as the inspiration for the Indian Houses of Parliament. When this temple was built in the 11th century, it was a place for women. The figurines and statues in the temple were all female, and the temple itself would have been full of bejeweled female dancers. There were once many temples like this, but Chausath Yogini is one of a handful that are still in reasonable condition. Many of its original statues are missing, though. Each of the 64 chambers carved into the walls of the circular temple once held a figurine, but most of them are long gone. Shiva lingams have been placed in their place in more recent times. The temple stands in an earthquake zone, but has never been damaged by any of the many earthquakes that it's experienced during its long existence. Centuries of Mughal rule eroded feminine hold over temples, eventually leading to an era of patriarchal Puritanism that saw temples like these abandoned. It's not quite true to say that you'll find old Aztec temples and monuments everywhere you go digging in Mexico, but they do have a habit of turning up in unexpected places. We saw that happen in late 2016, when this circular stone platform was found underneath a supermarket in the Tlatelolco district of Mexico City. Archaeologists were called to the scene after the structure was found, and it didn't take them long to identify it as a temple dedicated to Ehecatl Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec wind god. It's roughly 650 years old. Archaeologists in the country aren't sure why it's never been noticed before, as the supermarket that once stood on top of it wasn't built until the mid-20th century. Gruesomely, the archaeologists also found the remains of sacrificed humans and animals around the platform, including infants. Now the temple has been found, efforts are being made to ensure it's never forgotten again. The site has been fully preserved since its discovery and is now open for the public to come and view it through a protective glass window. Let's stay in Mexico City a moment longer and talk about the infamous skull rack of the Great Temple, also known as Templo Mayor. The skulls carved into this rack are made of stone, but the skulls they represent are, or at least were, very real. There are hundreds of skulls carved in neat rows on the temple wall, making this a sculpture of a Zompantli. These skull racks served three purposes. They displayed the skulls of people the Aztecs had sacrificed, honored the gods those people were sacrificed to, and demonstrated the almighty power of the emperor. Presumably, the fourth reason was to put the fear of God into anyone who saw the skull rack. Real skull racks were made of wood, and were larger than the one you see etched into this temple wall. Even the Spanish conquistadors, whose brutality is infamous, are said to have been shocked when they first encountered the Aztecs and their skull racks. One Spanish writer claims to have seen one 200 feet long and 100 feet wide, containing countless thousands of skulls. Mother Shipton's Cave in Knaresborough, England, with its legendary so-called petrifying well, is a wonderful place to visit if you enjoy spectacular sights and tales of the fantastical. The smooth, polished-looking stone formation has long been associated with witchcraft in the local area, and is said to have once been the home of a woman who was both a witch and a prophet. Her name, unsurprisingly, was Mother Shipton. During Tudor times, people genuinely believed her to be clairvoyant, although her prediction that the world would end in 1881 turned out to be way off the mark. People have been visiting her cave since the 17th century to marvel at the well, which is said to have the power to turn people to stone after being cursed by Mother Shipton in one of her final acts. Until modern science came along to spoil the party, the story appeared to be true. Objects left in the well would slowly turn to stone over a period of around 3 months. Science says that this has more to do with the process of evaporation, coupled with an extremely high mineral concentration inside the well. But who's to say Mother Shipton didn't put the minerals there herself? There's something fairy tale-like about discovering the site of Selva di Milano in the Soriano nel Cimino region of Italy. The stone altars are overgrown by weeds and trees, almost as if the location is a secret that the woodland itself is trying to hide from human eyes. The staircases and altars are carved out of volcanic rock, and it's thought that the ancient Etruscans are the most likely candidates for their creation. The Preacher's Stone is the most famous monument at the site, but the almost perfectly square stone altar next to it is the hardest to describe. There's a staircase leading up to the cube, and on its surface is the shape of a cross. Rather than being Christian, it's thought that the cross might have been used to assist with astronomical observations. The rocks and altars are surrounded by Roman tombs, but these were added sometime after the platforms themselves were carved. That implies that the Romans knew why this site was special, but they didn't pass the secret on to their descendants. If it really was created by the Etruscans, it's odd that they didn't leave any of their distinctive inscriptions on it. Let's stay in Italy and move on to what appears to be the set of a horror movie, sitting right in the middle of a beautiful Italian garden. These terrifying carved statues and caves are known as the Monsters of Bomarzo, and they've been giving people nightmares since they were built during the 16th century. Prince Pier Francesco Orsini commissioned the creation of the strange spectacle in 1552, and he never meant for them to be beautiful. The prince was struggling with his mental health at the time. He had battled through a brutal war and had lost both his best friend and his wife in separate incidents. The monster garden was to be an expression of his grief. Piero Ligorio was the architect chosen to realize his vision, an interesting choice given that Ligorio was known for more refined works like the Cathedral of St. Peter. If the massive screaming head in the middle of the garden doesn't scare you, perhaps its accompanying inscription will. It read simply, "All reason departs." Standing next to it is a giant fish head and a giant tearing another giant in two. This is a monument to violent insanity. Shall we have another stop in Italy before we move on? Why not? Here's the Santa Cecilia Necropolis in Soriano nel Cimino. The word necropolis implies a place of great sadness, but this is actually a beautiful collection of medieval ruins and cave dwellings, complete with stone sarcophagi which are slowly being swallowed by the forest around them. Right at the heart of the site is all that remains of the medieval church of Santa Cecilia, which was built in the 12th century. They include the apse, altar stone, and presbytery, all of which are damaged, but many of which still feature barely visible Christian symbols carved into their surfaces. The church had a necropolis, which eventually grew to cover a larger area than the church itself. each of its stone sarcophagi is marked with a relief of a Greek cross. Mystery surrounds the largest of the cave houses, which is close to the church and shaped vaguely like an open-air altar. Despite its shape, historians have never been able to explicitly confirm its purpose. It's commonly believed that this was originally a pagan site, which was later seized and repurposed by the Christians. Continuing with our theme of abandoned holy spaces, here are the Godstow Abbey ruins in Oxfordshire, England. Among other things, this building is famous for being the final resting place of the most notable of the many mistresses of King Henry II. It was actually King Henry I who ordered the construction of the abbey in 1133, though, having been told to do so by a lady named Dame Ediva, who claimed to have heard the voice of God telling her that an abbey should be built where the light from heaven touched the ground. Apparently that was Godstow. The mistress buried here was Rosamund Clifford, known better to history as Fair Rosamund, who was a long-standing mistress of Henry II during the 1170s. The king spent the bulk of his time with her at a hunting lodge in Woodstock, not far from here. Legend has it that she went to Godstow Abbey and refused to leave when the king ended his association with her, eventually passing away within its walls. We don't know whether that's true or not, but we do know that she was only around 30 when she passed in 1176. When you hear the word Moai, you'll think of the famous statues of Easter Island, and you'd be right too. Not all of the Moai are on Easter Island, though. There's one standing alone in Vittorciano, Italy. It's more than 9,000 miles away from the other Moai, but it hasn't been stolen from Easter Island. The Moai in Vittorciano, which stands 20 feet tall, is carved in local Italian pecorino stone. It might not be related to the Moai of Easter Island in terms of building material, but it is in terms of the people who made it. It was carved by members of the Atan family in 1990, who used axes and performed the work by hand. Juan Atan Paua, the head of the family, was a direct descendant of Ororoina, recorded by history as the only survivor of a war between the Long Years and the Short Years tribes on Easter Island. In other words, this work of art was created by one of the very few people who can claim a direct connection to the originals that it's based on. We've made a few visits to Italy in this video, but we're going to make a couple more. It's worth it, because we get to see sites like Eremo di Poggio Conte in Ischia di Castro. If you translate its name into English, you get Poggio Conte Hermitage. In form and function, this is a medieval church, carved directly into the local tough rock, known to Italian historians for its unusual carvings. Some people believe the carvings were left behind by the Templar Knights, but that can't be proven. The hermits who created the cave during the 11th century were likely inspired by the Gothic Cistercian architectural style that was popular at the time, and added residential spaces within their church so they could live there. If they were responsible for the mysterious symbols, we have no idea what they meant by them. They're not consistent with any known Christian symbols of the time. There were once many beautiful frescoes here, but 6 of them were stolen in 1964, prompting local authorities to move the remaining ones to a local museum for protection. Australian cave art doesn't get the recognition it ought to get from historians and archaeologists elsewhere in the world. That means not many people know about places like Bunjil's Shelter, which is in Australia's Black Range. This ancient rock shelter, full of some of the country's oldest cave art, is thought of as one of the nation's most culturally significant sites. Nobody knows precisely how old the cave art here is, but it's safe to say that it was made well over 1,000 years ago. The Bunjil, who appears in the name of the location, is a mythical creator hero, said by the native people of Australia to be the protector of the natural world and all the people in it. They believe Bunjil created the water, the land, the animals, and the plants. When he was done, he turned himself into an eagle and flew away into the sky. Bunjil appears in the artwork inside the cave, accompanied by 2 human helpers. The shelter is just one of many sites within a region of the Black Range known as Gariwerd, which is regarded by the Indigenous people of Australia as a spiritual place. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!